Hey guys, it's EJ with Blockpad, and today, as part of our video series on arrays, we're looking at lookup functions. So, Blockpad includes the basic lookup functions that you can find in conventional spreadsheets like Excel or in Google Sheets. Generally speaking, these functions are going to work the same, but there are some differences that we're going to cover later. Now, for this video, I am going to assume that you have a general knowledge of lookup functions in conventional spreadsheets. If you don't, there's lots of resources online that you can look at. But for this video, I wanted to take a look at some of the particular things that you need to know in Blockpad, and especially some of the differences that we've got. So with all that said, let's get started. Just a simple example here, VLOOKUP, maybe a little refresher. So for the first value, it's going to be your lookup value. And here it's text, but it could also be numbers or numbers with units or anything like that, so long as it's matching the column that you're looking up. And for VLOOKUP, that's always going to be the first column. So we're corresponding to this column here. So if I want to know the price of a banana, I put the banana in, and then fruits, which is the name of this table. So it's going to look at this whole table range, and then 3 for the column index. In this case, price is in the third column. So I'm getting 59 cents per pound as my answer to that. Now, because in Blockpad, table ranges and arrays are pretty interchangeable, you can also use an array for that middle input there. So here I have this veggie array. And for my lookup value, I have carrot. And then I pass in the veggie array and the third column. And so that's going to give me this here. The match function also works the same as in conventional spreadsheets. You type in your lookup value and then a single dimensional array, and your result is going to be that lookup value's position in that array or its index. You can do that the same way with an array. You can either pass in a one-dimensional array directly, or as I have here, I'm passing in this two-dimensional array, but I'm using parentheses indexing to get the first row. So because I have parentheses 1, what's being passed is this first row here, vegetable color and price, and so price is going to give me a result of 3. Blockpad also has Xlookup, and again, you're going to put in your lookup value and then your lookup array, which is one-dimensional, and your result array, which is also one-dimensional. So I have that here as table ranges. If I'm going to go and use an array, then again, either I can pass in a one-dimensional array directly for the second and third inputs, or as I have here, I have this two-dimensional array, and I use parentheses indexing to get the first column and the third column for those respective inputs. And so I get 49 cents a pound when I'm looking up cabbage. So that's a little overview and a look at how you might use an array directly for these lookup functions. Moving on, I want to look at some details in the differences between Blockpad and Excel. So Excel, for VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, you have this fourth optional input where you can put in true or false to specify whether you want to use an approximate method or an exact method. Now, in Blockpad, you can do the same thing. So here I have that last input as false. And so it's going to use the exact method. And my lookup value here is 0.3 inches. And so because that doesn't match any of these exactly, I get an error because that doesn't work. But if I put in true for approximate mode, then because these are an ascending value, it's going to look down at the next lowest and then give me the value for this value here, so 0.167 pounds per feet. In addition to this false and true option that you can put in, we also have the functions VLOOKUPExact and VLOOKUPApprox, and these are going to correspond to those false and true inputs, but we find them to be a much clearer way to do it. So instead of just having an arbitrary Boolean at the end, you have the word VLOOKUPExact, and so you know what you're doing right as you type it. And in addition to these two methods, we also have another function we call VlookupInterpolate. And instead of an approx mode, where it just returns the value from a nearby lookup value, VlookupInterpolate is going to use interpolation. It's going to look at the two lookup values that are on either side of your lookup value and the two result values and use interpolation with that, basically how you would naturally use interpolation when you're looking up a table. So for example, if I change this to 40C, then that's going to give me a result of 1.007, which is between these two values, which is between 20 and 50C. Now, you're not going to find any of this functionality in Excel or Google Sheets. This is just in Blockpad, and we added it because we know interpolation is an important part of looking up tables in a lot of engineering situations. So we've got that in there. Moving on, Excel also has a few options for the match function where you can have -1, 0, or 1 to specify match less than, match exact, or match greater than methods. Blockpad does not have that same -1, 0, or 1 input option, but we do have the functions that correspond with those options, which are match exact, match less than, and match greater than. And I have these examples here. So match exact, it has to match exactly. 0.6 doesn't, 0.5 does. Match less than, the values need to be in ascending order, and it's going to find the value that's less than your input value and return you the index for that. And match greater than, the lengths need to be in descending order. If they're not, you'll get an error, and that's going to give you the match that's greater than that value. So those are really the big differences that I wanted to cover between conventional spreadsheets and Blockpad. And as a final part of this video, I wanted to introduce this idea that I think is particularly useful with lookup functions. And that's the idea of using a lookup function as part of a custom function definition. And so when you do that, you can reuse that custom function all over your file, and you don't have to retype in your VLOOKUP every time you go to use it. So for example, I have this table here of how density changes with temperature for water. And instead of looking this up every time I need density, I have this custom function down here, row of t, where t is going to be the input for my custom function. And then VlookupInterpolate, and t here is that input. And then I have the table and the index like normal. And so now when I use this custom function down here, row of T1, it's going to look at this VlookupInterpolate, which is then going to look at the table. And then it's a much clearer way to have that in your calculation instead of saying volume times VlookupInterpolate of T1 and so on and so on. You've got your custom function right there. So I just wanted to point that out as something that I find particularly useful. And with that, that's all I've got for you guys today. I'm going to put a link in the description of this file that I use for the video series on arrays and a couple of other useful links as well. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thank you.